Good afternoon. Um, thank everybody for being on. And before we, like I said, get started, are there any questions or comments from yesterday? I know we covered a lot, and there's a lot to think about. And Pastor went into great details um, about a couple of different things. And any questions or comments before we get started, or even any thoughts or that yesterday or even the day before? No. The pastor, is it one thing I was going to ask if sort of without going into to a full discussion about the melanin yesterday, we kind of finished up, just kind of discussing the not the racial undertones, but just is there any way you could just give a quick recap of everything we did yesterday as far as how you closed out? I don't think no one had a question, but then I also want to kind of look at just that expansion we talked about before, how it's kind of continuous. But before we do that, if you remember, because I think it just kind of flowed a little bit yesterday, give us just a few minutes on what we closed on yesterday in regards to transition into the melanin.
Um, I think I started talking about the way that we had looked at Cain and Abel in the past was spot on. However, there's another layer to it, and that layer is that Cain's attitude and Abel's attitude are indicative of the chaos that we are experiencing now, in that the attitude of Abel was one of deliverance, was one of obedience, was one understanding the significance for one with the Creator. And the attitude of Cain was, I do as I please, regardless of what my Creator tells me to do. I worship as I choose to. I function in this world as I choose to. And that whole idea is the idea of the isms that we deal with now, that Caucasian, that European attitude towards spirituality, towards humanity, wherein Abel's attitude is more of the African's attitude in regards to spirituality and humanity. And I saw that in relationship to the levels of melanin that exist in humanity. And I also made mention of the reality that melanin is the one thing that is not discussed often, because it is seen as being racist. And the only reason that the European has us saying things like what you said, as racial overtones or undertones, I've said the same thing. But I've come to realize the only reason that is said to us that it is racist is because they are what, trying to influence us, in that we won't talk about it because we don't want to be racist. We won't talk about it because we don't want them to think ill of us. We have gotten to an understanding, okay, that the reason they don't want us to talk about the multifunctionality of melanin and the reality that there is no life without it, and the levels of melanin has a determining factor on emotions, thoughts, intellect, etc. And I saw something else in that, One of the scripture says that the life of the man is in the blood. And if you think about that, if you give any thought to it, what you have to conclude in relationship to melanin is that the only thing that's in the blood that that is life without support from anything else is melanin. And that life itself speaks to the origin of life and the sustaining thereof. And when we speak of the life and the sustaining of life itself, then we are also speaking to how we respond in the midst of humanity. Meaning, if life is important to you, then you make sure that all life is protected, all life is nurtured. If life is not important to you, then you become selfish and greedy and racist and angry at everybody and everything. And the first thing that you do is minimize the power of femininity, and you also make every attempt to degrade the position and purpose of the African in the earth. And I think at the end, Ron brought up something about being ready. And I solicited us to look at that because I have some opinions about it. Thoughts about it. Because, opinion is, well, I'm not going to say that, but you know what it is. I have thoughts about it. And I intend at some point to express those thoughts because I do believe that ready means much more than what we think it does. And I hope that covers at least part of it. If not, please raise the question or remind me of something I said and I'll continue.
Yeah, well, I know one of the things that, going back to Ruddy was the way that, I'm just going back down to splitting the different philosophies, for instance. And I'm just looking at how we look at it today, or how it's the perception of it today is two things. That one, you can look at the person who is red-faced as showing their emotions, or they're healthy or angry, or just or almost as an emotional response, embarrassed, blush. And where they say that, we in general, heavy melanin, you can't see the blush. So the expression is a little hidden. Or the person who's reddish could also symbolize, hey, I've been working hard. I've been out there sweating and just working hard. So I think the emotional response was one thing that I thought about. Because when you think of a ruddy person, you also can see their emotions, and because they can't hide it, and that's the way to kind of given that perception, tailor it to today's thoughts, as far as it was more of an emotional versus someone who's
well, since you went there, my thoughts about it is that it speaks more to the spirituality of humanity as a whole, as opposed to the complexion of skin. Meaning that if Adam is a ruddy being, then that means that this spiritual entity has its essence is dependent upon something that's red, which is blood, through which the life of the human flows. So I'm looking at the whole concept of this entity called Adam as being designed or to being created for the purpose of being made physical, and the making of it being physical will result in its life-sustaining source being blood itself. And And the reason I say that is because if you look at the Hebraic understanding of Adam, what we would see is that it is an entity through which the essence of Elohim flows. So if the ruddy essence of Elohim flows through Adam, then that flows through Adam in the blood itself, which means that the melanin itself would be the essence of Elohim. And that is the reason that those with a heavy level of melanin within them have a greater sense of forgiveness, loving kindness. I'm not ruthless. I'm not, by and large, greedy to the extent that it would destroy the world and everybody else in order to get what it wants. I didn't intend to go. I didn't want to go there, but that's what I'm beginning to see in relationship to this idea of being ruddy. And I do believe that if we follow it through with the mentions of those in Scripture being ruddy, we will begin to see the same principles involved, as opposed to seeing the lack of melanin in skin tone, which will reveal your emotions by virtue of being red in the face. So anyway, that's what my thoughts are at this juncture in regards to the idea of being ruddy. And I do invite questions, comments, and assistance in helping to understand this, because I do believe that we would not be here at this juncture speaking of this if it were not extremely important at this point where we are.
This is Ron. I have to admit I have not had time to study Ruddy. I meant to and got engaged in something else, looking at something else, and didn't get back to it. But something you said earlier though, there seems to be a mystery to me about how. Is there something that the European knows that we don't know? Meaning, you mentioned the African and the feminine energy, and I was listening to you guys talking Saturday when I think it was Audrey's talking about the ways that men have gone trying to suppress women and the way they're treated. And it seems like the two most powerful energy sources in the earth are being controlled and suppressed, and that is no coincidence, of course. And I would suppose, and this is kind of my question, is that something that the Creator has done for a purpose, for such a time as this? Or is it something more that again that the European may know or has something more to it from that perspective? I guess is what I'm asking. What do you see there? Anybody?
I do see that being necessary. The suppression of the African and the suppression of femininity. And the reason I say that is because the nature of the African, and I'm not talking about skin tone, I'm talking about the nature of the African based upon the melanin speaks volumes about the essence of how we are supposed to be. And if we are supposed to be the deliverers in this earth, as Jesus' name indicates, if we are supposed to be creators in this earth, then how do we create? That in order for us to create, we have to embrace the feminine energy. And the suppression of the African and the feminine energy suppresses the principles of the kingdom as well as the womb through which they are birthed. and not realizing the power is two together, meaning the principles and the womb of the feminine energy, bringing those two together has the ability, has the power to change the trajectory of mankind in an instant. So the European attitude, as is Cain, is selfish and greedy, and wants to do what it wants to do, what it takes to do it. Look at Cain. Attitude says to Abel, "I will kill you because I think you did something or better than me. So I will kill you." And rather than destroy the attitude of Cain, the Creator protected it. For what purpose? That attitude was protected in order to give us the substance that we need in this earth to become the creators as is Elohim. Creating a car does not make you Elohim. Creating harnessing electricity does not make you Elohim. What makes you Elohim is doing what Elohim does. And what does Elohim do? Elohim brought into existence in a way that it was independent, or had the ability, rather, to be independent. And that independence granted the privilege for the Adam to be able to create in the human a type of life that is like the life of its creator, or the image of the life of its creator. We lost all affinity for that. We lost all of our desires for that, because we bought into something that is 100% European, and that is naming Adam a man, as opposed to it being Adam, the entity. It became Adam, just like John Adams, and that was never the intent of the scriptures. So what we have seen is that the attitude of Cain makes everything that is spiritual translated rather in an attempt to make it natural. Like, for example, Jesus, give it all to Jesus and everything gonna be all right. And Jesus says, I'm not the one you pray to the Father. You meditate on the Father, you focus on the Father, not me. And notwithstanding that, putting Jesus in a place of a European in thought, and as well as in presentation, which both are wrong. So I see the suppression of the feminine energy as well as the African as a necessity that pushes, that make provisions for the substance that's necessary for humanity to become humans, become Elohim, having a human experience. And the European has the necessary substance to learn from the African if he chooses to do so. Rather than learn, what he has done is stolen from the African, the thoughts, the inventions, the creations, stolen all of them and placed his name on it and made every effort to destroy everything that the African has provided, inclusive of its cultures, its language, the understandings of the holy books that came out of the heart of the African and the soul of the African. So we have been put in a position on purpose to resent our color, but also to refrain from speaking the way I am speaking of melanin and the African and femininity and the European, because by speaking that way, we are being made uncomfortable by telling us that we are being racist, when in reality, the racism is on the basis of every effort to suppress melanin and what it means, and the melanin for what it does. Knowing that melanin is the only thing, the only element that exists that sustains life. There is absolutely no life if there is absolutely no melanin. And you say, well, if there's no blood, there's no life. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this: there is no tree without melanin. There's no apple without melanin. There's no frog without melanin. There is absolutely nothing without melanin. Thank you. I hope that helps, Ron.
Yes, sir. It does. Thank you.
Let's go back a second to just an observation, like, and just compared to what we were talking about recently to true creation. And I guess you can confirm this by saying yes, true creation never dies. And what we create is we create an awareness about a certain thing, and that thought turns into I guess energy that we harness. For example, when we say we true creation is an awareness about something. And then going back to when we talked about the feminine energy, when we talked about Supreme Court appointment a couple of weeks ago, that we sort of touched on that. When you ask me, if someone asks me a question, who's the most powerful masculine energy in the world, we can sort of point to that. But when you were talking, I was thinking, okay, who's the most powerful representation of the feminine energy while you were talking? And I really couldn't signal out one female representative, but I saw that there's more unity in that side. For example, where I couldn't really point to one, but I kept thinking there's more unity when it comes to the feminine energy. Can you touch on that or explain that? Because I'm going somewhere to go back to creation, but one was true creation. I don't think it ever dies because you're creating an awareness. And then the second question or observation is we have a harder time identifying a female representation of the feminine energy, but at the same time I see that as more unified.
So I would rather say that true creation never ceases to exist, as opposed to never dying, because
right.
I do not that we have a clear understanding of what it means to die. Right. I think death in our vernacular is totally different than what death really is. So you're right. True creation does not cease. And that is the reason we are doing more uncovering and bringing a more of an awareness than we are doing what we call teaching, if that makes any sense.
Yes.
Now, as to the power of the feminine energy, is that what you were raising the question about? It?
Yeah. Well, like when we say, okay, who's the most powerful representation of a male, and I'm not saying from a spiritual standpoint only, just from what we see. Like we can always say, okay, you've got the president of, say, of the United States. You recognize that as power in general. But since we started talking about the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago, you feel like there's an opportunity and there's a place for things to be birthed. But when you say, okay, who's a powerful female in the world?
I got you.
One person. I almost feel like there's unity for some reason. I can't really just put the hand on one person, but it seems like that's more.
I got you.
Okay.
I got you. You cannot. If we look at power with our eyes, the most powerful person on earth is Mitch McConnell, because he controls whatever happens in Congress. If we look at it with our eyes, Biden can only do what Mitch McConnell allow him to do, even though he has a minority in the Senate. When we look at power through our eye, we began to see you cannot put your finger on one person, on one female. It is not so much of a unity, which comes from the word unit. If there is a unity, then there can also be a division. However, if there is a unicity, it's all one, has never been divided and cannot be divided ever. And I see that in the African womb. And when I talked about the Supreme Court Justice nominee, the Supreme Court Justice, nominee, because she hasn't been sworn in yet. I see her not individually in terms of power, but I owe that through the eye of Atlanta, Stacey Abrams. I see that in various females around the country. What's happening now? The lady, the Haitian, who is becoming the press secretary for Biden, African woman, Supreme Court African woman, Governor of Georgia, running for Governor of Georgia, African woman. I see African energy beginning to expand, not explore, but expand and into places where it should have been all the time. And in doing so, bringing birth to a nation that will give birth to a global movement that will bring balance to the earth as a result of the unicity, African feminine energy in the earth as it exists today. Does that help?
Yeah, it does, because I was struggling. I just saw many, and I didn't see just one thing that we could point to, but for whatever reason on the other side, it was so easy to kind of point to it, and that makes sense totally. Does that anyone have any questions or comments on that?
I'll wait for that first. Go ahead. Any comments or questions?
I just want to make sure that was kind of clear. But you answered how I was. I just couldn't really put it into words.
Right.
Anyone, any questions or comments about that?
I don't have a comment about what you just said as to what Real had talked about. My comment is on how do the melanin and the red man or red, however you said it, ruddy. How do the ruddy and the melanin deal with the Esau and Jacob, and the mother took up on how she did Jacob. She took upon herself of what she did. You understand what I'm saying? How did that feels out?
If the difficulty with explaining that lies in the reality that we have been taught to process every name in the Bible as though it is a name like I call Charles or I call Thelma or James or whatever, when it is not. It is an allegory, it is a story that is being told in a way that it can be transmitted from generation to generation. What it is speaking about is the spiritual aspects of life itself and how it came into existence in the earth, as well as how it is to be sustained in spite of the obstacles that it will face. And in order for someone to remember a story, you speak to them about what is common to them, and you name certain characters in the story based upon the actions that they are supposed to engage in order for the story to be not only understood but easily transmitted to the next generation. For example, if you look at the name of Moses, you see his action. You look at the name of Abraham, you see the action there. So when we look at the names, we have to dispense. We have to look at them outside of what we have been taught from a Western education. That names simply label a person and doesn't deal with the character of the person. In the scriptures, all names deal with the character of the people that they're talking about, and the people of whom they're speaking are actually more of the activities that is taking place in a spiritual way for the purpose of helping us to understand how Elohim, how we are in Elohim's image, and how to become the human, the Elohim having a human experience. So, Charles, is not so much about Esau and Jacob as it is what the Esau and Jacob represent. What do their names mean? For example, like Jacob, we talk about Jacob as a supplanter, someone who took something from Esau. Well, if we look at it from the spiritual perspective, the way it should have been looked at, what we see is that you can start out with an attitude of selfishness, an attitude of greed, and it is very easy that if you engage with what's inside of you, when you begin to wrestle with, am I doing the right thing or not? When you wrestle with that message that's inside of you about who you are, and you begin to embrace the nature that you were created to be, then what happens is when you begin to see the light, when daylight appears, when you see the light, you hear a voice that tells you, you are no longer Jacob, you are Israel. You are no longer one who is selfish. You are one who will rule just like Elohim rules. That is your character from this day forward. Does that help you, Charles? Or anyone else for that matter? Are there questions about that? Anyone?
It's hard for.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's hard for us, and I think we're beginning to see this now in the last year or so, because I think we can all see how our lessons have turned, to be more personal for us, for our growth, and for us to become what we are to become for mankind, and that is to be enlightenment. So taking it from a personal perspective, you see that I am as much Abraham as I am Sarah. I am as much Jacob as I am Esau. So when we look at these are talking about us. These are talking about your persona, your spirit, that same breath is in you. So we look at these lessons, and I hope we no longer see them defining God, but defining mankind, and especially he who seeks to be the human. So when we look at these, that's what we're doing. We're uncovering who we are, away from the pride and the things that you built up in yourself, or what religion has said, or anyone else has told you. So, and I think everybody who's been on this phone for a period of time can feel that energy, and feel that shift and that change that we're all getting it. So when we talk about these characters and names and whatnot, put yourself in their place. Now, that's you. Every bit of them, everything from Adam all the way to the end of the book is talking about you, and it's helping us to see who we truly are. So, and that's, every bit of it, every emotion, every breath, everything that you see in there, it describes who and what you are, and what you decide to become. So anyway, just hope that helps.
You know, when you were talking, Ron, and just thinking back how we've been going through the eighth sense here all these weeks, and then we talk about, you know, creating. We talked about just being, we talked about enlightenment last week, how, you know, how much, you know, our enlightenment is really, you know, we were just talking about success last week. I guess what I'm seeing now, and I don't want to, like I said, Pastor, I don't want to jump too far ahead of you, but the actual process, when we just break down the process of receiving wisdom and converting that to understanding, that's a part of the melanin you're talking about from a spiritual standpoint, is that because that's inside of us, and that's, you know, who we are, part of who we are, whether your outward appearance is white, black, you know, red, that interior melanin, the absorbing of the wisdom and information we're getting and converting that to clarity and understanding, that's melanin. Because when you start talking about the energy that we receive, when you're aware of who you are, we're able to absorb that. We're able to, and so when you talk about melanin or something black, that color, from a scientific perspective, is able to absorb any kinds of energy. So when you're aware of that, we're able to absorb that. We got that clarity and understanding. That's how that process has happened. When you're not aware of it, and you're talking about things coming at you externally, you kind of reflect it or deflect it. So in order for us to understand everything and absorb this wisdom and really truly convert it into the clarity that we need to understand who we are, that's the importance of melanin in that process, because we do absorb that energy and align it. But if we're not in a state of awareness and we're not as clear, then we're sort of deflecting that, because we're blocking things on the outside. And I guess I hadn't seen like that before.
You're right, yes. Absorb all light. Black absorbs all light. White rejects all light. It's incredible that pink people call themselves white, and African people call themselves black, when in a lot of cases it's actually more of a blue than black, and in some cases even lighter than black. So these are concepts, and the concept of white rejects all light. The concept of black absorbs all light, which means that the concept of white rejects energy. The concept of black absorbs all energy. So in God, we have to be very cautious about how we deal with it, so we can deal with it truthfully and not in such a way that it becomes superficial or becomes nationalistic or becomes racist, in that we are saying that we are better than you because we're black. That's not what we're saying at all. We are saying that we are indebted to you because we're black. And our indebtedness to you is to make sure that you learn who you are, so you can become more of a human than been in the past. This whole concept of the browning of America speaks more to the concept of an attitude that is being taught, being nurtured by melanin, by the attitude of melanated attitude of people. Matter of fact, if you don't have to have brown skin to be part of the browning of America. The fear of the browning of America is racist in itself. The fear of browning of America says that I want my skin to stay the same, meaning that I cannot absorb or I refuse to absorb the energy that makes all of us one. So I'm concerned about my skin tone, wherein the African is really not. Because if he were, then that would be a overwhelming rejection of any relationship with anything lighter than the African. And that's not true. The other thing about that is when we look at the whole concept of melanin, we see that there are gradations of the amount of melanin that is present in people, in groups of people rather. And that gradation of melanin starts with the African at a higher level of melanin, and it goes from the Asians, the Native Americans, the indigenous people of South America, Australia, etc., to the Caucasian in Europe. And what we begin is that during that gradation, the lowest level of melanin is in the European. And when we look at that and we understand the principles of the kingdom are loving kindness, forgiveness, etc., and we see the brutality, we see the brutality of slavery, we see the desire, the unbridled desire to destroy everything that does not look like it, then we can understand the reason that those attitudes are there is no different than Cain's attitude. It speaks to a lesser smaller gradation of the presence of melanin, which means that in order for us to do what we are supposed to do on Earth, we must understand that melanin is nothing to separate races. Melanin is nothing to make you superior to anyone. Melanin is the material that Elohim brings into this earth in order for the human to be a creator as is Elohim. And the creating of that human is not creating of a person physically. It is creating the attitude in the person that makes them human. And that attitude that makes that person human is one of loving kindness. Is not an attitude of racism, white supremacy. Is not an attitude of fear. I don't want to be black. Question raised. So if you are white, and if I were to give you everything that you got, you're super rich, would you trade colors with me? Would you be a black super rich man, or would you be a white super rich man? Would you trade colors with me? And I have never found a white person tell me yes, not one. So this is deeper than just money. This is looking at the color of someone's skin and saying that they are so distant to me, they are so beneath me, until I would not take their color if it meant that I had all the money in the world. And as greedy as Europeans are, for them to reject a color and could have everything else, that speaks volume about the animalistic attitude that exists there. And that is our purpose, to bring humanness to the animalistic attitude so we be in balance in the earth. Questions or comments? Complete silence. Are there any questions or comments? Does that make sense to you? And I promise you, I did not intend to talk about melanin today.
No, and I was trying to just
don't apologize. No. You are not getting ahead of me. Yes, it is. You cannot get ahead of me. I can't get ahead of you. Whatever needs to be uncovered whatever needs to be the awareness of the day, the Creator is going to make sure it happens, whether we want it to happen today or next week. It's in the hands of the universe to bring it into being. So you are, as most of us, all of us are conduits through which what we need at this moment is conveyed to us. Okay?
No, that's, I mean, I see that melanin is just like, I just see it, everything as a part of us. And, you know, like I was just thinking this morning as today that we are, at least from my perspective, you know, nothing is, I'm just seeing things that nothing is one and done now. So like everything is always a part of us, and it's constantly evolving and a part of that expansion that we're talking about. So we constantly expanding, and the melanin has always been there, but now we're expanding on it, and that's just always like you know, the expansion. There's so many different things, but like I said, it's always been there. It's something that you've talked about before, but now putting it together with everything else, it just seems like it's an expansion. And the one thing I kept coming out of this weekend was that all of these things, we talk about the awareness, and we talk about the journey, it's never ceasing. And we may have like just looked at things as, okay, God, we discovered something new. It's like, oh man, Pastor told me about melanin. Okay, that's good, and it's there, and I understand. But now, when you're talking about it again, the second time around, it's so much more in depth, and I don't see it as something that we just discovered, but it just seems like it's okay. It's almost like the creation, like things get created and they never cease, and so now it's all these things are never ceasing, and I just see it as part of this big expansion, almost like a fog that's just covering the sea, and it's just always it's going out, and it's just expanding and expanding, and so that's the visual I get. It's just like these things are not ceasing now. It's like it's just always an expansion. It's growing, and it's growing on the inside of us. So that's where the questions now, we bring up questions, they're coming from the inside and not necessarily an external pressure. So that's the thing that I just see, that this is like we absorbing teachings, what everybody's saying. Now when we go back, and Barbara had said something about you sitting in a restaurant, you know, maybe about a month ago, and you can feel the energy from somebody else. Those are all things that we absorb and we change, and now it's just kind of like the process is just becoming more clear, if that makes sense.
It does. It makes sense to me anyway.
Yeah. But as always, we've talked about things, but it seems like the process and the understanding of it is just becoming clearer now. Like as soon as you said it about the melanin, I just automatically thought about, you know, that's the part of us that's able to absorb and process things. That's where everything kind of emanates from, whether you decide who you are, but you also the forgiveness, the focus, all these things get, you know, those energies get absorbed and aligned, and that melanin is what absorbs it and aligns it, and that helps us to begin the process of thinking clearly, and it's just something we have to have. And, you know, I'm just more, I guess, fixated on the process and how this, you know, it's always been there, but now we just kind of like, we're fully aware of it. We're becoming more aware of it. And I think this awareness that we've been dealing with the last several months is just, it's creating something inside of all of us that we know is not going to end. It's not ceasing. And like you said, it's just the beginning of it. It's starting to grow with every question, with every comment. It's just starting to grow, and we just see it. That's just my comment or statement.
I have a question. Did I hear you say that because of the melanin, we're the ones to have forgiveness?
I said that the melanin speaks to the principles of the kingdom, and I used as an illustration the principles of the kingdom of forgiveness, of loving kindness. That's who we are. That's who melanated people are, and the idea of revenge, of animalistic attitudes, brutality, destruction of cultures, and destruction of anything in the earth in order to get what you want. That speaks to less melanated people. The attitude, the concept. That's what I'm talking about. So,
I'm glad you said that, because I always wonder. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was finished.
Well, I always wonder why we always had to apologize when everything was done to us. And when you said what you said, that's who we are. Then now I understand.
And I don't want you to think that we apologize, because we don't. We forgive, and that's a huge difference. You apologize for what you did. You don't apologize for what others did. You forgive them for what they did. Okay?
Yeah, that is a big difference. You're right. That makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, it's Ron. I want to use this as an example. I haven't had time to do all the research I want on this, but I made a statement to Pastor about the white privilege and that's being a negative thing and being a curse is what I called it, and I was almost pulled back from the word curse, and the reason why I did was a curse. Someone that has to administer that. Someone has to be, the cause of it. And I never saw the relationship between white and black people, that the African put a curse or made this thing happen to the European. So I was looking at it from that perspective, trying to see, because curses have origins, and I never could see where that originated. But and I'm still researching that. But in talking to Pastor, I do still understand that what I see with this is still a curse and of sorts. And I want to talk about it for a minute, because I think it says the same thing that S just described and what Pastor was saying. That word curse, it puts an attachment there. So you are responsible for that person that is being cursed, and you attach yourself to them. So a true curse always have an opening or a way to redemption. It is not just to damnation for something that's going to last in you forever, at least in the spiritual sense. So I'm listening as talk about expanding and Pastor talking about the forgiveness part. If you look at the essence of white privilege, it blocks you from seeing who you are. It blocks you from seeing the Creator, and it gives you a false sense of superiority, and it builds you up with this false religion and builds really a world for you that does not exist. And because, though, if you look at it this way, the African being attached to that, I was reading something in the Hidden Gospel that says, blessed are those who curse you. And that word blessed, of course, talks about to kneel and whatnot, but it also talks about to yield. And I looked that up in the Aramaic, and the yield is talking about attaching yourself to this thing. It's talking about a place of intimacy, almost to the point of a man attaching himself to a woman. in an intercourse type way. So we are attached to them. We are a part of them, and they are a part of us. And when we recognize fully who we are and walk in this thing, because what we're describing here, they're not going to come out of this on their own. They can't. Their vision is blocked. There's nothing that they see that's going to show them the essence of who they truly are. The only way they're going to do it is the browning of America. And again, that is talking about a spiritual concept. And you see the manifestation of it in the people, birthing children, but that is talking far more than that. So the staying the course is what, as talks about, what Pastor talking about, attaching ourselves and becoming forgiveness, becoming loving kindness, and that expansion thing is real. That success and getting understanding community and the loving community, because it made me think about when I was a kid and where I grew up and how the community took care of itself. So all of these things are real. So I just wanted to add all that because I want to come back at some point and talk about curse and get into it a little bit more and white privilege and how that all works. But I just thought that fits in and is a good example for what I'm hearing everybody discuss right now. Thank you. I hope that made sense to you. If not, ask me a question, please.
I have one. So you're saying if we have people like where I work, we have people who call in and they so used to having their white privilege. And, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this person here, they know they've had privilege. In my mind, white privilege is all along. So they feel like they can just call in and talk to me any kind of way. So are you saying, because I want to get this right, you're saying the minute that I have that thought, I'm wrong for having that thought?
I'm not saying you're wrong at all. I work in a similar environment, and these are things that we're learning right now, Evelyn. It's not something that we're going to get overnight, but as we have these meetings, as we talk, as we become comfortable with who we are, as we meditate, it will come a time where you can take a breath and listen to them and not get upset. That day is coming. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but I promise you that day is coming. I remember not too long ago, I was very uncomfortable about saying that I was Elohim. That made me uncomfortable. I didn't say anything to anybody. I moved from a place that was uncomfortable, and now I cannot tell you the day, the time, the minute, or the hour that I got comfortable with that. But I can say it now without hesitation and understand it and feel it. But it took some time for me to get there. When the young man stomped and killed a woman in front of her mother, I had to borrow love and kindness from Kathy, because that wasn't in me. And it took me a while for hearing her voice before that came to me, that me breathing and feeling that, actually feeling it without fooling myself. I felt it for myself that, hey, I have forgiven him. So it's going to take time. I'm not saying it's going to, but you have desire. I listen to your question. You're here every week, like all the rest of us. You have desire to get this, and we're all going to get it. It's going to come.
And you're right. And it happens subtly. And I just want you to know there are times when, because we have people who call in and they just start screaming, and I realize that it's not me. I don't take it personal like I used to. I sometimes have to put them on phone timeout, meaning that I have to put them on hold and make sure I don't get upset, because we don't get anything resolved when both of us are upset. So I understand exactly what you're saying, and thank you.
Yeah, there are times when I worked at Dish, and I would take, and that wasn't my job, but I would take phone calls because when they would get irate people, they'd send them to me. And I would talk to him, and I'd say, you know what? Before we start, I want to apologize to you. I understand you're upset. I just spoke with your rep. I understand, and I'd talk to him, and I said, let's take a deep breath and let's talk. Let's try to resolve your issue. And by the time they get off the phone, they were apologizing to me. It took me a while to get there. It took me a little while to get there, but I'm more and more understanding who I am, and as S was saying a few minutes ago, this expanding thing is, and this my words, each one of his, it's overtaking us. It's overtaking us, and we're changing from the inside out, whether we recognize or not. But it's little things like your phone call that's going to be a measuring stick to you of that exactly how much you've grown and how much you transitioned into being loving kindness, into seeing and experiencing being Elohim, and passing that experience over through the phone.
I hear you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. It does.
We talked about this several weeks, maybe even a month or so ago. We all have our little battles, little things that we go through that helps to sharpen us. So you know, Evelyn's are just different than mine, and mine different than yours. But they're all things that we all kind of battle with, and there are days we're weaker at things than you know. Anyone else? Questions or comments?
Ron, I have a question. When you talked about the browning of America, what is the difference between slavery when the slave master had children with the slaves and those kids? Because I read an article the other day about this fair-skinned black woman had children because her master couldn't have kids, so he had children with her, and they looked like white children, but every day she had to see those kids, but they grew up, you know, to resent her because she was black and a slave. So what's the difference in the browning back then and the browning now? Do you understand my question, what I'm asking? Because it's really the same thing.
Well, it's not the same. At least I don't see it as the same, Linda, because of the violence. Because of the violence and the selfishness of it. It was something totally different. In the physical sense, it was. In the physical sense, you see the people, the skin color and the skin changing, but it was something that was taken, and it was a total disrespect and disregard for femininity. But somebody help me out with that. That's not the same thing that I was talking about, but I think it's an excellent question.
Well, the way you just showed it to me, I understand it, the difference in it now with the violence, because that was something that was taken by force, and this is now is, you know, you do it because you want to.
See,
go ahead, Pastor. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
I see, Ron, exactly what you're saying. I see exactly what Linda is asking. And if the Creator knew and orchestrated and said, I will bring Cush back to me even if I had to do it in chains, then everything else that follows that means that it's attached to that statement, does it not? So as brutal as it was, and God knows it was, and still is, that was a way to get melanin into the enslavers. The melanin, when there is a test done, a DNA test done, and there is found to be African genes in a Caucasian exterior, that means that there is an increase in melanin in that Caucasian. Though it was done to denigrate, it was done to satisfy evil passions. It was done to minimize the power of a man in relationship to the woman who he was married to. It put melanin in the bloodstream of Caucasians. And it increased that melanin, which means that it accounts for the change in some of those, the hearts of some of those Caucasians. Marching during the George Floyd murder, being involved with the abolitionists. All of these things are involved in that. If we just step back from what we see with our eyes, and respond to accordingly, if we just step back, what we will see with our eye is the multiple ways that the Creator has opened doors for those who are traveling this journey to be able to reach those who have done everything in the world to destroy them and hate with a passion. If we just step back and look at those multiple ways, what we see is, if it were not for forgiveness, there would never be balance in this earth. Because the attitude of the Caucasian is not to forgive. The attitude of the African is. Therefore, Ron said earlier, the manifestation of the browning is seen in the skin tones or in the children who are being born. And that is twofold. It is also increasing the melanin in the Caucasian bloodstream as well, even though they may not even look like they're an African. It's there. So Linda, I say to that, there is a difference and there isn't a difference. It is a difference because of the rates, and the difference between the rates and now is that there are relationships that are based upon LOVE, that are based upon affections, as opposed to animalistic desires and ownership and forced and men forcing themselves on. I hope that helps you there.
Yes, I understand. I see it clearer now.
I do too. Thank you.
Okay.
That was a very good question and explanation. Thank you.
Welcome, sir. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, Barbara. Hello.
Go ahead, Bob.
Hey, I just wanted to point out just a couple of things. Some of the research that I have been able to do thus far, this issue of ruddiness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Esau was called ruddy, David was called ruddy. It's been found 3 or 4 times in the Bible. We all carry the dam, or blood, from Adam, the first man, and blood is red, as has been said. one of the things that I did find was that in Melanesia, in the Solomon Islands, the Black Islands in South Pacific, it's northeast of Australia. The Melanesians are the only Black people in the world to naturally have blonde hair. So the blonde hair thing is not necessarily just a European trait. Another thing is, there's a book called The Classic Slave Narrative. A slave by the name of Oladua Equina wrote a narrative in this book. And he gives details about some men who lived near his village in Nigeria, West Africa. And what he said was, these are sometimes visited by stout mahogany-colored men from the southwest of us. We call them Oye Igbo, which term signifies red men living at a distance. And so even back then, Africans called men who were dark, who were, if you remember, the color mahogany has a reddish tinge, a reddish tone. The other thing is that Blacks are the only people able to produce every shade of color in the spectrum, a rainbow of colors. And that rainbow includes even not only the rainbow of colors, but albinos. But I don't want to just mislead you where albinos are concerned. There are albinos. Europeans can have albino children. Africans can have albino children. But Blacks are the only people able to produce just about every shade in the spectrum. And so even the people who were fathered by the folk who enslaved them, some of them were called red bones, meaning it has to do with the color of their skin. But the thing that I get out of all of this is, for Blacks to be the only people who can produce every shade of color implies a spiritual underpinning of the importance of melanin. Apart from, what I'm saying is, Pastor, you made a statement years ago that, there wouldn't be any racism once, Blacks started white people's children started having Black children, because they married Blacks. So this had to occur. Melanin had to be increased in the quote unquote white population, which is really not white, but white population, so that there can be an infusion of that forgiveness and that loving kindness. It reminds me of what Jesus said about the grafting of the trees. It reminds me of that, this grafting, ingrafting of loving kindness, so that at some point in time, over time, with the increase in melanin in the races which don't have very much, that there can be more balance over time seen. I don't know if that makes sense. It was just a physical thing that I read, but I thought about the spiritual underpinnings of it. Okay, thanks.
It makes sense to me. I told you you guys are going to do that research on Ruddy, and very brought it. So it makes all the sense in the world to bring a lot of clarity to what we've been talking about as well, because look at what's happened now with the discussion of it, and just think about it. If we had been hesitant about discussing it because we were afraid that somebody will call us racist, then we would not have the understanding that we do now. Neither will we have the spiritual insight into the power and advantages of what melanin is all about. We would have been still looking at it as being something racist discussion. Thank you very much to all of you guys.
I think we've come too far to fear anything.
Well, it's kind of like we go back to what I think Evelyn was saying, and I thought about her question when she was asking that earlier. Everything is already here. It's just a matter of at what point in time are we going to uncover it and be aware of it. You know, when she asked her question, I can't even remember the exact wording of it, but I just remember that that she was always there at her job, and it's just a matter of time when she was going to be heard, or when the energy was going to be, you know, just transformed for her to make a difference there. So we're already in place. It's just a matter of time, you know, when we're supposed to be aware of it, when we're going to be heard in it. So I just thought back to like everything that we need is already here for us. It's just a matter of time of when it's uncovered for us, when the awareness and clarity comes for us about it. And that goes back to what you said earlier, Ron, about just, you know, just the reason you stay the course is, you know, we used to look at and say you never know when your number is going to get called as a negative thing, but you never really know when the uncovering is going to take place, and the awareness just happens for us. And that's why we just keep going back to why the connection and the bond and the need to be communicating and connected with each other is important for us, because everything is always there. It's just a matter of time when we have to uncover it, or the awareness just becomes revealed to us.
Yeah, you're right.
Any other questions or comments on that? You know, it really just gets you thinking about so much stuff that it's when Barbara talked about the Melanesia. I'm on a, you know, because of the group text with some of my friends, and there was a big fight in the WNBA that they sort of made public today. There's a black WNBA player, but she's from Australia. But apparently she told some of the women on the Nigerian team to go back to the third world country, and it was a fight that happened, and it just kind of came to light today on one of the news feeds. I think either Craig or Joe sent it out, but it's just when Barbara started talking about the Melanesian people, I just thought about the comment she made, and we were just saying earlier today, she didn't view herself as you know, truly black when she said that, but it was just something that made light today. So it just goes back to what we were saying earlier about just the awareness and just things being uncovered. Well, now this is an opportunity for her to really understand, because she's, you know, being held accountable for what she said, and of course the fight that broke out in regard in her statements. So I just thought it was just ironic that we even, you know, not ironic anymore, because nothing happens by coincidence, but it's just the timing of that and just our discussion today. But that just happened today. I think it was her name's Liz Cambridge, and she made those comments. But if you look at her, she just looks like a a black African American citizen, but she's really from Australia and that region. But she told the Nigerian team to go back to the third world country.
Well, she sounds like a lot of us.
Yeah.
I ain't no, you know, how many black people have you heard? I ain't no African. What are you? I'm American. So why are you poor? Why you don't have any privilege? Why is it that you get put out of everything? Why is it that you're at the bottom of the scale? Why is it nobody likes you who runs this country? I mean, people are, I think it was necessary for her to do that so that we could address things like that, because it's time for us as Africans in this country to understand that the difference between an African in this country and an American is that Americans have privilege. And the privilege that Americans have comes from an animalistic attitude. It comes from greed. Privilege is based on greed. Privilege is based on racism. Privilege is based on misogyny. Privilege is based on everything that is antithetical to what the scriptures say. And that is the major difference between the African in America and an African trying to be an American. I'm done.
It's back to the assimilation. You're trying to assimilate what you see instead of lining internally.
Absolutely.
Gets us every time. Any other questions or thoughts for tonight before we close out?
Yes, I do. This is Jackie. I have a thought or a comment. And I work in the office with 3 Caucasian males, and they drink coffee all day long, and they'll put the dishes in the sink. And we kind of had a meeting, and I said, we're a team now. When it was just one advisor in the office, he and I, we kind of split, when we would wash the dishes. But it's 3 of them in there. I don't drink coffee. Even the dishes that I bring my own dishes from home, and I wash them when I get home. I don't use any dishes there. So we had a meeting about, we're a team now. There's more of us in the office. Kind of wash your dish. And it's one advisor in particular. He talks about scripture, church all the time, politics, and I don't get caught up in that. And he said to me, it was a couple of months ago, and I did not react. I kind of held on to it. I kind of looked, and I was surprised that he said it, but I shouldn't have been, because he didn't even know about Black Wall Street, and he didn't know much about Emmett Till, but he knows everything else. And he said to me one Friday morning, I come in, he was standing over near the sink. He said, Jackie, I don't want you to wash these dishes. I said, don't worry. I didn't care if they had mold on them. I wasn't washing them. But he said, because I don't want you to think because you're Black and a female that you have to wash these dishes. And I looked. I didn't say anything. I was like, well, I'm not going to wash them anyway. And I just went on to my desk. Then later on, last week, he was talking about scripture, and we kind of talked about racism a little bit. And I said, I want to ask you something. I said, you said to me a few weeks ago, I said, I just want to know where you are, because you say you're not a racist. I said, but you said that to me. He couldn't remember he said it, but of course, I can't make it up. He said, well, why didn't you respond? I said, it's best I didn't, because it probably wouldn't have came out pretty. So I didn't. I said, but I just want to know. I said, listening to you talk about scripture and your beliefs or whatever, I said, for you to have said that to me, I said, I just wonder where you are. And I kind of put my hand on my heart. I said, I just wonder where you are here. And well, first of all, he didn't remember saying it. I said, well, of course I couldn't make it up. And he was wanting to know why I didn't say anything when he first said it. I said, I couldn't. So what's your take on that? And it's still bothering him because he mentioned it today.
You say it bothers him, and he mentioned it today.
He mentioned it today. He said, "Jackie, that's just like what I said to you." He said, I just looked at him,
Just leave it alone. It's bothering him, and that's objective. It made him think about not only what he said, but who he really is. That's part of a curse too. Curse does not mean you put something negative on somebody, right, Ron?
Correct. That is correct.
It puts you in a place where you cause people to do an introspection. Why would I say that? If I'm not this, why would I make that statement? That kind of thing. So just leave it. You did the best thing by not responding, because your response would evoke something from him that would make him make every effort to put it back on you. Your silence made him think within himself and ponder what he said. So I just leave it alone. That's where I am with it. And what about the rest of you guys?
The same.
The same.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you. I didn't say anything to anybody when he first said. Of course, I talked to my husband, but I didn't say anything else, about it. But it did just kind of raise a brow. But it did, like you said, it just kind of let you know who they are, and and what they're thinking.
When Ron talk about the curse, it's going. You'll remember this, and you'll see. You have a far greater understanding of it, and you will see the reason so many of us had things said to us, and we just disregarded and did not know what we were doing at that time. But I'm sure that with the in-depth research that Ron is doing, and with his affinity for teaching, he's going to carry us to a place in understanding the curse like we never had before, right? I'm done.
Yeah.
I'd like to commend Jackie for the way she handled that, because the fact is, if she hadn't said anything to him, do you not think that he would have came back with something else? But now that he's been put in check, he'll think before he speaks again. And then if he doesn't, he know that you're going to correct him. So I think that was a good thing.
Yeah, Jackie created a level of awareness in him. No matter what he's thinking now, he's got to kind of educate himself and teach himself something about it. And then whatever he learns, he's got to choose what he does with that going forward. But she's already stimulated a level of awareness in him just based on her and her response. So
Yeah, I think she handled it beautifully. Putting him in a defensive posture, he does not learn from that. He still be angry or either trying to defend it. But she made him think.
Is that not the same thing? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Is that not the same thing what Kathy told us about? She did not miss the opportunity to get it right or to whatever. Is that the same thing? She did the right thing. She created an opportunity to cause things to happen.
Same principle. Yep. I want us to listen to what Jackie said. Not so much of what she said as there is being on these calls, what it does for all of us, what it does for humanity. The simplicity of what she said is more intricate than we would ever thought it was. And there was more of a lesson in it to make us aware of what may come, but also aware of what we have experienced in the past in regards to what she experienced at that moment. So I say all that to say this. You don't know where your comment or your question is going to carry us. But you please know this, whatever your question or your comment is, it is designed to help every one of us. Thank you. So please ask him.
Absolutely. Yeah. Anyone else? Any questions or comments?
I have a comment. I was looking on YouTube, and there's two black people, real black people, and they had a child together, and the child came out white and blonde-headed. And the scientists trying to figure out how it happened, they're so puzzled about it. And it's a true thing.
Recessive genes. All I can say. Yes.
Anyone else? I think, like, just from examples, and we talk week in and week out, that we see, we just become more aware of even some of the smaller details that that we encounter now. And just, I think, just as a whole, our awareness of things going on around us is just expanded, and more things are being exposed to us for that reason, for us to put forth the proper energy or the right, correct alignment for it. So I don't think any of these things are happening by accident. Even some of the smallest things that we see and come across, it's really there for just the mere thought of us thinking of it, and the attention that we give it even for a minute. That's energy directed at it. But I don't have any other questions or comments, and if not, we can pick it up next week if there are no other questions or comments either.
Enjoyed it. Thank you, S.
No, I appreciate you guys. I appreciate it. Like I said, I'm getting on here, learning new things every week, and I'm at the Google Melanesia now. I'm looking at the pictures of some of these beautiful kids on here, and just the different, just a lot of things you just don't think of. So it just, we just keep the wheels turning here, really.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye,
Yeah, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
everybody. Thank you.